in view of the difficulties of the last months and the fact that Palestinians apparently did not manage to succeed over the first phase of the roadmap, to put it very mildly, it was some creative invention in a kind of arithmetic, maybe to start with phase 3 before phase 1. But because even the United States didn't want completely to abandon the roadmap and its importance, to make a kind of a virtual agreement, where the final phase was made before the first phase, I don't know, maybe to find a kind of process of an escrow to deposit somewhere, and when everybody will behave, to put it out of the box. The problem is that you cannot enter even into a virtual agreement, just because of what I said. But the two parties on this virtual contingent agreement will meet tomorrow. And again, leave me now with refugees, Jerusalem, and territories. This is the list of the problem. They will have to decide with number one, who will control the Alamy Bridge. Now, working when you negotiate, when you draft an agreement, it must be based on a certain realities. That is the art of negotiation. If the roadmap had been implemented the way it ought to be, by now we would sit here in this negotiation, let's say after 3 years of incredible experience with Palestinians running Rafah. The Israeli negotiator, I would say to Nimrod, listen, they are better than us in controlling passages. Their policemen are much tougher. They are less polite. Why shouldn't we trust them with the Allenby? And the Allenby issue could be solved in 5 minutes, maybe. If I am a negotiator on the state of Israel now, what should be the working assumption of the bridge to allow them to control a bridge? By the way, would the Jordanian will ever agree to a show of the same kind recently happened in Rafah to happen now in Israel? Well, the Palestinians claim, and remember, that was years ago when I was negotiating, an international airport near Ramallah. Let me tell you, if Palestinian life would be conducted the way they undertook in the roadmap after 3 years of excellency in their self-management, I would be the first one to support an international airport in Ramallah. I trust it would be much better than Ben Gurion. Do you believe that on the negotiation, on the working assumption to start tomorrow, anybody will agree? The Palestinian asks us, as part of final state resolution, to allow their security apparatus, no matter whether it's the military or police, to operate. I think they spoke about 6 helicopters for reconnaissance, for traffic control, for rescue. Had we been, after 5 years of the most successful relationship between those communities, they should take 10 helicopters. By now, so it is just
okay, Nimrod, I know you want to respond, and then we'll open it up, but I could tell that you're...
Okay. That's what you said about the details and the devil, so yeah. I love to be the devil, but...
Menachem Begin, when he decided to evacuate the Sinai, in the context of peace with Egypt, there was tremendous uproar in the Israeli senior staff. We had in the Sinai a facility, intelligence facility, that they were convinced that it was the equivalent of the scissors, which means those scissors that Delilah took, cut Samson's hair, and left him impotent. You give up that facility,
Rabin gave it up already, the interim agreement.
We cannot survive. And they invited him to the place called the Hall. It's a legendary place, the Abur, to present him with the devastating consequences of losing our eyesight as a result. And the story has it that Menachem Begin stood through the presentation, and listened, some attentively, some less. And when it was over, he told the generals with great respect, he said, gentlemen, you make a very, very persuasive case. But I decided that there will be peace. some of us define our negotiating context with the Palestinians on the premise that a peace deal is the continuation of the occupation by other means. And therefore we have to control everything. We cannot afford to.
No,
how can we be in a situation where their Qassam will exceed 12 kilometers? So we build a national strategy on encapsulating Hamas inside Gaza, choking them, and making sure that a 16-kilometer Qassam will not be smuggled in. And we build a national strategy on our ability to control that border and their technology, and that it will never exceed. And we wake up one morning, and the Qassam is 17 kilometers. And we wake up another morning, and they break the fence into Egypt. And suddenly we find out that our entire strategy was built on false premises. And maybe, just maybe, it's time that when we enter negotiations, we do not try to determine who is the quarterback of the other team, who plays defense, and who is the coach, and what will they wear for the next 20 years. Maybe it's time to change the entire premise of negotiations. Now, some of us have vast experience in negotiations, some of us less so. But there are two sets of negotiations over permanent status, exercises of negotiations over permanent status with the Palestinians. One of them was done by a member of our, currently member of cabinet, previous chief of the Navy, and previous chief of intelligence, Secret Service, Ami Ayalon, and a Palestinian counterpart, also former member of cabinet, Nusayba, and they came up with a set of principles governing such negotiations, or a deal. And if we end 2008 by endorsing that one, we will leave something very important for the next administration here in Jerusalem and in Ramallah. A second set was the Geneva negotiations, where ex-Israelis and incumbent Palestinians negotiated a permanent status deal, demonstrated it's doable, and called upon governments to improve upon it. Don't take it as is, obviously. Improve upon it. The fact that this is doable has been proven. It's not going to happen in 2008, but some progress in that direction can take place.
Yehuda, you have...
I'd like one comment, basically two short comments on what I said. First of all, I must say to my good friend Nimrod Novik, you have to differentiate, and those of us like you, and Dubi more than anyone else, but myself to a small degree have been involved in actual negotiations, and there are other people in the audience who have followed them know. You can't compare. I've been in many track 2 discussions all over the world, and it's in the track 2 discussion, it's always easier to reach an agreement than track 1 discussion. And you have to understand that. So Geneva, a couple of nice people sat together, and it was doable because they don't have any responsibility for anything. So it's easy to have it doable. And they don't have to, by the way, get it approved by the people either. So it's certainly also easy to have it doable. But when you have representatives of elected governments who have to reach agreements, first of all, they have to bear responsibility forever for those agreements. Second of all, they have to convince their publics. It's a totally different story. That's number one. Number two, we must not underestimate, again, this is I say regarding what Nimrod said, the importance of security from the eyes of Israeli public opinion. I think Dubi said it, and I think Nimrod mentioned his mother. She should live and be healthy at least till 120. Today, you got to be careful when you say 120, but at least 120. Her gut feeling, and there's good reason for this feeling. This is DNA of a few thousand years. And therefore, I agree with Dubi Weissglass in one point that I mentioned before, the negative effects of what happened in Gaza after the disengagement. And not only, by the way, what they did to Israel, but the fact that they couldn't even get their own house in order. The fact that went on between themselves is what showed Israeli public Again, what this can turn out to be cannot be overestimated. It doesn't mean it cannot be overcome, but it certainly must be recognized as a key fact. The other comment I want to make is, and again, in the final analysis in Israel, and I wrote about this, a book called Civil-Military Relations in Israel a few years ago. So this is a thesis. I'm a great proponent of it. And you mentioned it in Begin correctly, Nimrod. In the final analysis in Israel, you should have no mistake about it. The civilian politicians determine what is going to be. And the military has a great input, as it has in every democratic country, and correctly so, because as they say, later we're responsible on the ground for it. But in the final analysis, Begin did what he wanted, and Barak left Lebanon what he wanted, and everyone else did from the days of Ben-Gurion until today what they wanted. And Olmert in the Lebanese, Second Lebanese War decided not to bomb infrastructure, and that was done. But again, one should not underestimate, again, the importance in terms of public opinion of a military point of view on issues of security, just like in the United States. And answering your question, my final comment, I think a shelf agreement may be possible, but again, and I agree with Dubi here again, the devil is always in the details. And people who are not involved in the thing are not aware how many details there are here, each one which is important. And track one, track two, you can forget about those details in track one. So a shelf agreement, if it would be in very general terms, might be possible, because each one is going to explain it differently to his public. But the question is then, what do we achieve with it? Did it really achieve anything? Did it really move forward? We have a lot of shelf agreements. We have a road plan, and we have there's a lot of shelf agreements. The problem is when it comes to implementing the details. So maybe this is productive. Maybe it is important. But again, if it'll be too detailed, then it can't work unless it's a complete program with all the things which we realize is difficult. If it'll be a very general shelf type of agreement, then the question is, what is it worthwhile? This, I think, is the key question that you raised that has to be analyzed.
Okay, we're going to open up to questions. Raise your hand, identify yourselves. We're going to probably take 2 or 3 at a time in the interest of time. And Martin, there's a mic.
Thank you, Martin Indyk from the Saban Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. Listening to Nimrod describe how 2008 can unfold successfully, I had this horrible sense of déjà vu all over again. Because you, in fact, described exactly the circumstances of 2000. And we've seen this movie before, and it ended very badly. So, of course, we have Olmert instead of Barak, and we have Abu Mazen instead of Arafat, and we have George Bush instead of Clinton. But it's quite amazing to me, ironic in the extreme, that 8 years after we tried that, here we are back in the last year of an American administration with a president who was determined to avoid this circumstance. Now, here he is declaring in the State of the Union, having never mentioned Israeli-Palestinian peace in any of his previous State of the Union speeches. Suddenly in his last one, this is his objective for his last year in office. So the question really is, I think it goes to Nimrod, why should this year be different from other?
Manishtana.
I can't hide that Aaron and I had exactly the same thought. Let's see who else back there.
What's your name?
Hi, my name's Glenn Kaminsky. I just wanted to ask particularly Mr. Ben Meir on the poll, if there were scientific polling done, and maybe there has been at a level of detail that you did on the Palestinian side, would the same answer result? Is the center in the Palestinian community the sort of controlling opinion, really, at the end of the day, setting aside all the talk that's both sides, that both are too extreme and blah, blah, blah. But it seems to me if the answer is yes, then an agreement could be reached. If the answer is no, then let's just not talk about it anymore this year until that answer is yes.
Take one more. All the way back there, the last row. Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Detweiler from American University School of International Service. I was just wondering how Israel and Israelis how they can reconcile their desire to disengage from Gaza completely and leave it up to the Palestinians to establish a sovereign entity in that region, and the reality that Israelis or that Palestinians in Gaza remain dependent on essential services from Israel, and also if you see that the current policy of embargo is effective, and what will be the measurement of that effectiveness?
Nimrod, why don't you start off answering whichever one you want?
My honest bottom line is that we Israelis will stop deja vuing about the process only after the cloud will clear and the river of blood will be very visible for both Palestinians and Israelis. We keep finding excuses, both sides, as to why not to address the issue, why to look for bypasses, why to look for interim this and interim that, rather than go for the real thing that will satisfy the political aspiration of the other side and the need for security of Israel. And it's true. There's only one thing. It's an interesting equation that for outsiders may be difficult to appreciate. In this equation, we give everything, and we ask only for one thing: security. Sounds interesting, but we give everything because we hold everything. We're in control of everything. So it's the one area in which somebody like me, who was trained as a political scientist, insulate analytical conclusions from operational assumptions. The analytical conclusions are always pessimistic. There's no way to be optimistic about the Arab-Israeli situation, the Palestinian-Israeli situation. There is just no way to be optimistic when you see the complexities and when you hear how difficult the gyroscopic environment makes it difficult. Yeah, the complexities are there. But for those of us who raise family, children, and grandchildren in that part of the world, we got to insulate past pessimism from assumptions of future optimism and rise every time that the process collapses and start from scratch. Hopefully, younger generation that comes into office to the place where the old ones who are sitting here, not you two, the Israelis, left off, will be smarter, wiser, and more creative. But yes, we will deja vu over this over and over and over again until we have a solution. So, do we start an analysis of what went wrong in Camp David and why it failed and how it could have been slightly different had it been prepared differently by the Israelis, Palestinians, Egyptians, Americans, and others? Or do we say, because it failed then, it always will? Because it was the best, it was flawless. That particular process was flawless. And if it failed, why bother? Beyond that, President Clinton, when he presented his ideas, added to it an immortal statement. If you guys don't take it, I'm withdrawing it, and it doesn't exist. Well, did it really evaporate? Is there anybody who deals with the Palestinian-Israeli process who does not take the Clinton ideas into consideration? They survived all that. That's wonderful. Something constructive happened, even though the Intifada erupted and destroyed everything. And I can put my finger who's the bad guy with the Intifada or who's the good guy in the Intifada, and that will do nothing to create a new phase. So I can blame Arafat. I have a more complex understanding of why it happened than just Arafat was a bad guy. Okay, I have a more complex one. But that's good for memoirs, not as a prescription for tomorrow morning. as a prescription for tomorrow morning, I believe that the fact that Israelis are likely to go for elections in 09, early 09, the fact that Abu Mazen is probably not going to run again in early 09, and that President Bush, for the first time, did what you just mentioned, suggests that something constructive can happen by the end of 08. Will it be enough as a historical breakthrough? I'm not sure. Will it help? I have no doubt.
Yehuda, why don't you answer? We have the question about public
There's a
opinion.
question for you. I'm not an expert on the Palestinian poll, so I can't give you a definitive answer. Many of these forums, I appear usually with my good friend Dr. Khalil Shkaki, who I know was here previously at your forum, and he's certainly a good expert on that. The only point I would like to make, I follow the Palestinian polls, but again, I said I'm not in my expertise. I think there is a underground support amongst Palestinians and a desire amongst many Palestinians also to see an end to the conflict. The problem is a Palestinian society is organized different than Israeli society, so the impact of public opinion there is in, because you have there, I don't know how much, Dubi knows better than me, 50 or 60 different organizations, all with armed wings. And with
Over
guns.
400, by the way.
400, okay. So,
Over 400.
and when Abu Mazen said one law, one gun, he knew what he was saying, because he realized that from point of view of his society, until he's going to have one law and one gun, then even the public opinion, it has its effect, but is limited. And he's still, unfortunately, far from reaching that. And the other point I'd like to make is, just to add some consequence, I think, from the very important point made by Martin Indyk, I believe, Nimrod, that if I think the President of the United States, of course, has great great input in the thing and has great influence, but I don't think this is after November. In my opinion, after November elections, the ability of any United States president, and I know that till the noon on January 20th he remains president and he can do what within his constitutional rights, but his ability to influence a deal on Israeli-Palestinians when everyone knows who's the elected new president is, and each side will always think maybe I can get a better deal with whoever the next one is, which I think, by the way, may have been one of Arafat's reasons when he thought in the end of 2000 this is one of his many mistakes, but that's beside the point. I don't think that in those last 2 months, Nimrod, an American president can have that tremendous effect like the first Camp David, let's say, where you can really have bridging proposals and with all the effect and the force and the prestige that the President of the United States can have and his effect on both sides. I think this is a point we have to take into consideration. After November, in my opinion, we're in, you said money time, real time, I would say dead time, until a new president gets in charge, and that can take a long time, as you know better than me.
Dov,
That was the time that
Nimrod.
Reagan recognized the PLO.
Okay.
Dov,
Okay.
if you keep it
Left the mark.
relatively short, because I think we have many more
The president can
questions.
do something, but not effectuate a deal.
I'll refer shortly to combine two questions. I mean, Martin's wondering why 2008 is going to be a special year. It will not. And the question we have from up there about disengagement. So again, I hate to say the third time. It will be the fourth, like Cato's statement. But again, let's go down to reality, to the details. The real possible deal between Israel and Palestinians is very simple, and this is axiomatically accepted. Is we, the Israelis, we want primarily security, less peace, security.
And acceptance. And recognition of
Leave me with the acceptance. Secure. Let's start with something, God forbid. Let's start. Acceptance can be in 200 years. I mean, we don't need their recognition as a Jewish state, as a Jewish people, and they don't need our recognition as a moderate Muslims, okay? Leave us alone. We want primarily to start, like in every conflict, to start carefully to undo the problem. Firstly, security, namely, leave and let leave. Let us leave where we live. You guys take back 90%, 95%, whatever is yours, and let's live without killing each other. Just to remind you that as of September 2000, we have over almost 1,200 casualties in the Second Intifada, by which 90% are victims of suicidal attacks, maybe the most devastating way to die on earth. When a suicider take on board of a bus, his instructions were to remain stand, so his vest, which is leveled with passenger head, should decapitate as many people as he can, okay? the average is, if I have the details, about 60% of bodies. It takes 2 weeks later to match heads into bodies. So we can continue with those phrases about peace. One event of this kind, you understand, give a good kick to every peace effort for 5 years.
For 5 years, exactly.
Now, so we want security and peace in terms of not the legal meaning of peace, peace in terms of lack of violence, non-belligerence, will bring about everything later on. In this very basic deal, what the Palestinians are asked now, and this is exactly what the first phase of the roadmap is about, to act against terrorism. So I very much agree with Nimrod that who we are to tell the Palestinians who will control the passage. Okay, it's not us should control the passage. I agree with you, but they should do it. But somebody should do it. What we were praying, what we were dreaming about Gaza, that this mini pilot, this teeny tiny state of Gaza, as Abu Mazen himself told us, just give us a chance. We will turn into Singapore. Somebody mumbled, let's see, it will not turn into Kandahar. Okay, but to see what happened with this little Singapore. Now, so what good all those ideas and principles and exchange and concepts will do when on the ground the people who are directly responsible to security will undermine any effort. And I agree with Nimrod Novik that when it comes to a relationship with a more or less well-organized country like Egypt, when it comes into a state-to-state relationship, it is Menachem Begin historic vision to tell the generals, leave me alone with your surveillance system. I take upon responsibility because there is somebody on the other side that will not abuse the absence of a surveillance system to invade the following day, and the Egyptians did not. When it comes to our good friends with the Palestinians, with over 400 independent social political entities, each one of them has his own, little arm, a poor Palestinian prime minister, and I say poor because it's impossible mission, has to negotiate his way in those relationships between the various groups to agree with the other, and to not agree with the other, and so he is not in a position when he can guarantee the Israelis, as I said, the basic, immediate, maybe the only commodity he should deliver now, which is security. So let's
just take a few more.
Yeah.
And
all the rest is not important, because if it is not security on the basis, there is no way to build on top any sort of a political formula that will work.
Okay, and then we'll have a few more in this round.
Hi, my name is Gaith Alomari. I'm with the American Task Force in Palestine, and I was a former negotiator. And just a point of fact and then a question. During the Gaza engagement, and I was an official then on Abu Mazen's side, we also told you that if it's unilateral, it will make it very difficult for us to impose security and governance, because security and governance happen in a political context, and unilateralism verifies Hamas's message and undermines ours. So there is a political context to it. But as you rightly said, and as you implied in your presentation, the Israeli and Palestinian parties are intertwined via security. The flip side of it is that traditionally, security and stability on the Palestinian side only is only doable when there is a political process and a political context. So you have outlined the problem, but what is the practical solution today? Or are we doomed to just give up and look for another conflict to deal with?
Okay.
No. I'm going to take. I got to take 4 questions. The gentleman back there.
My name's Howard Moreland. There are things that people tell pollsters, and then there are facts on the ground. And it seems to me that no matter what happens, the facts on the ground are that the settlements exist and they expand. And I'm talking mainly about the big block in central Samaria, eastern Jerusalem, and the line along the Jordan River that assures Israeli control of the Jordan River. Seems to me that the primary value of Israeli society is that those settlements will stay, and that's more important than security, more important than the Jewish majority. So it seems to me that Greater Israel is alive and well.
The woman over here, second row.
Thank you. Dr. Neo Miguel Schusterman, visiting professor, Center for Israel Study, American University. I'd like your comment or your ideas about the refugees problem in light of the comment that President Bush said in Israel, that as Israel absorbed the over 1 million refugees, Jewish refugees from Arab land, just in the same way when the Palestinian state will exist, will absorb the Palestinian refugees. Just to mention that over the years there were close to 700 resolutions by the UN in regard to the Middle East conflict. 101 dealt with refugees, all dealt only with the Palestinian refugees. Coming here, being here only a few months, teaching at the universities, I see that the campuses are very politicized. And whenever you mention the word refugees, is automatically connected to Palestinian refugees. Nothing really mentioned about the over 1 million of refugees from Arab land. So I'd like your comment about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's have one more, Ziad, on the front row.
Thank you, I'm Ziad Asali from the American Task Force on Palestine. For the last 3 years, we did not have Arafat to kick around anymore. And we've had very seriously acceptable policies of Abbas and then Abbas-Fayyad combination. It seems to me several of the options that Israel exercised in its policy vis-a-vis the Palestinians have ended up undermining this theme, to the point where this theme may not survive in its pursuit of the two-state solution. What exactly is the Israeli option if this theme falls and they will have to deal with another reality?
If what falls? If the team falls, I mean
Abu Mazen Fayyad team falls.
Fayyad leadership.
Okay, I want to take one more because yes, over there.
Josephine Fransen from the Netherlands Embassy. It's a question for Mr. Meir, specifically on public opinion and security. As security is such a crucial thing, obviously, for Israel. When do you think, or is it possible at all, to reach a point where a situation described by Mr. Weisglas, where one terrorist attack really can sabotage a whole process? When can Israeli public opinion actually carry that, and can a leader push through with a process?
Okay, that will be the last round, so if people could take the opportunity to answer as many questions, but keep it relatively brief because we're already past our allotted time, and conclude
okay,
as well.
so I'll do it as best as I can. Mr. Al-Omri, this engagement from Gaza was not unilateral, you know it very well. It was unilateral, it was decided unilaterally, but implementation was with a close cooperation with the Palestinians. We entered into agreement where we should withdraw. We entered into agreement what will be the faith of the structures. We entered into agreement about the greenhouses. We entered into agreement regarding Palestinian security forces somehow to secure the withdrawal. We had many talks about it. Now, what does it mean unilateral? If we told you we are leaving Gaza up to the last inch, what room was left for negotiation? The very decision, the basic decision to get to there was our will, and that's what happened. So I don't know what unilateral is, but so let's say that we unilaterally got out of Gaza. I'm sure the reason that Gaza turned into what it is now is because a kind of an insult that we didn't ask a permission to leave out Gaza. No. Gaza could be maybe the best, the optimal pilot of success, of excellence, of manifestation to the world what Palestinians can do when they are left alone by the Israelis. And unfortunately, it ended differently. Because of this sequence that first is security and then all the rest, and unfortunately security doesn't happen, and I don't want to repeat. So Palestinian security forces unfortunately fail to intercept 90% of the terrorism attack, and those who are turned themselves willingly, no need to run after them, turn themselves willingly, ends up in 15 years in jail. So let me tell you, this unacceptable and outcome of this murder 3 weeks ago in Hebron area damage the peace process in a manner that 100 conferences of this kind will not help, because that's what really matters for people. That's what people would like to see primarily from any agreement, is to see security. What is the solution? Very generally speaking, the solution is to engage now into a long-range interim agreement, to start work piece by piece, to minimize the friction, to reduce our presence in the West Bank, to withdraw from those far remote settlements that are not part of major blocks, to try to bypass the major issues and to build a better, of course, to invest more in economic development, in other confidence building measures, but an attempt to sit down around the table within a year and to come up with the agreement regarding Jerusalem refugees block will not work, because long time before then they will not reach an agreement whether to reoperate the Dahania airport, whether to allow Palestinians to use a different aerial dialing aerial other than the 972. Which policeman will be in the and an answer to the gentleman who just made a statement, wasn't a question, it was a statement that the territories, the settlement is the most important thing. This engagement proved that for 3 years in a row, and again, Yehuda may say 60, I'm saying 70, 70% of the Israelis supported a unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. And we left behind a prospering area of 7,000 people who left beautiful homes and factories and public facilities and schools and auditoriums and maybe one of the world's most advanced agriculture, turned into refugees in their own country, create some social terrible problems that are unsolved until this very day. And the consideration is at the extended range of the Qassams. So if that shows that territories or settlements become the overriding Israeli consideration, I have no other answer.
Nimrod?
3 comments on the 3 questions. I'll start with the settlements. I don't accept that premise. Yes, settlement activity continues, but something very important of historical consequences, in my judgment, has happened, and that's the fence. The infamous fenced wall that has been attacked by so many has emerged as the most likely approximation of the future Israeli boundary, with a very powerful presence. Anything outside the fence is likely to go. Everything inside the fence is likely to be annexed by agreement. And the fence itself is yet to move, in my judgment, by the Supreme Court. The fence today encapsulates about 8% of the territory. And here I come to Dubi's notion of the devil is in the details. Agreeing to 90% or 95% does not produce an agreement. Agreeing to 100% with swaps may produce an agreement. So by the virtue of insisting on 10%, you're ruling out an agreement. So I think that, yes, things are happening on the ground that I don't like coming from where I come. But something far more powerful, I think, is happening, and that's the defense is enclosing.
Create political realities.
It's a very important political reality. On the refugees, in my judgment, the most important thing is the cutting the horizon between past and future. Cutting the horizon between past and future is no right of return to the state of Israel. There can be a host of mechanisms that address the legitimate concerns, demands, grievances of Palestinian refugees, but a right to return to their homes inside sovereign Israel is not that. As long as we argue whether this was right or wrong, just or not, who triggered it, who caused it, we will never have an agreement. But if we decide that there is a moment where we cut past from future and try to build something new, that is the one issue that I think wall-to-wall Israelis will insist upon. And the question of compensation, and do you figure into it what Jews left in Arab lands, I find it an interesting concept. I'm not sure totally relevant. What do we want from the Palestinian state because a Jew left Iraq or Morocco and left his property there? So I don't know. Maybe there will be some mechanism that will help address that issue. Maybe. In any event, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar international fund with Israeli substantial contribution therein and so on for compensation and rehabilitation. But I want to come to the main point. And that was, I think that Gaza today is the outcome of three mistakes. The first mistake was unilateralism. I negotiated the greenhouses, and on a given day, I was the proud owner of $15 million on the one hand and the greenhouses on the other, and I really didn't want to bring them together. It was a very nice moment. We were an NGO that ran this story. That's not bilateralism. We don't know how to manipulate intra-Palestinian politics. We tried it from the 1970s until the present, and we failed time and time again. That's what I refer to when I said we want to know to appoint the coach and the quarterback and the defense of the other team. We don't know how to do that. We kept saying strengthen Abu Mazen. We did not strengthen Abu Mazen when he was prime minister of Arafat. Arafat was stuck in the Muqata'a. That was a wonderful moment to say, you stay stuck in the Muqata'a and you are the man of peace. We give you Gaza. We got out of Gaza in a way that was perceived, to those who ask about Palestinian public opinion, in a way that was perceived, we retreated under Hamas pressure, not we yielded to our peace partners on the Palestinian side. That affected the outcome of the election. Mistake number two, allowing the Hamas to participate in the election before they qualify on the basis of the Oslo terms. Once they won election, mistake number three, we decided we, that is you and us, decided we can bring that genie back into the bottle. And we counted on a certain element in Gaza, and your millions of dollars went into it to strengthen a certain element in Gaza who will take over Gaza from Hamas at the critical moment. That element collapsed in minutes when it was first challenged. And we ended up with a reality where we are now. Gaza today is a consequence. We did not help Abu Mazen when he was prime minister. We did not help Abu Mazen when he was president of a homogeneous Palestinian Fatah government. We did not help him when he was president of a national unity government with Hamas. And we don't know how to help him today. Some guns are given and we run to tell our friends. Headlines in the press, Abu Mazen is a collaborator with Israeli security. We don't know how to play that game. And therefore we have to be a bit modest about how can we change intra-Palestinian politics. And now a great revelation about Israeli politics. It just occurred to me, dawned on me, why Yehuda is so right about the strength of the center. Because Dubi and I agree, coming from completely different ends, agree on what is likely and desirable, which is an interim long-term agreement, because under current circumstances, there is no way to reach, let alone implement, a permanent status agreement. And therefore, and here we part company again, I assume, I don't think that we are likely to have a deal until Palestinian politics are Palestinian government represents a broader consensus of the Palestinian people than it does today.
Yehuda, you'll have the last word.
Okay, short to try to answer the questions. First, number one, I don't believe that one suicide bomber can ruin everything. And without in any way reducing from the terrible emotional effects of the suicide bombing, I don't think we should exaggerate it either. So I think when Dubi said he didn't mean it literally, that one suicide bomber can destroy everything for 5 years, it was a form of expression.
That's exactly what happened at 96, just to remind you.
96 changed the elections. But meantime, since 96, Dubi, since 96, we've come a long way. Israeli society has shown its ability to sustain terrorism over a long period of time with very negative consequences. You mentioned over 1,000 people killed in the Intifada. And the center...
Staying in terms of internal strength, not to accept it.
We're gonna have to
like,
Dubi,
the elements. What you are suggesting that we got.
Let
me
him
talk.
finish,
Okay, I'm
and
sorry.
then we could
I
continue
didn't
later.
say, I God forbid didn't say accept it. All I'm trying to say is, I don't think that, someone says the Hamas can ruin the whole peace process by one suicide bombing. If there would be a genuine peace process, not one and not two and not three suicide bombings, God forbid, without believing them, is going to ruin the peace. The Israeli people are more sophisticated. And by the way, as Arik Sharon said to me correctly, the Israeli people realize that even after you have a peace agreement, it doesn't mean that there'll be zero terrorism, because you have terrorism all over the world. But what it means is that what the Israeli public wants to see, as Arik Sharon himself said, is maybe not necessarily 100% results, because we also don't bring 100% results. Thank God this year we're not close to 100% results. But we can also, as everyone knows, sometimes can have a mishap. They want to see 100% effort, and we don't see anywhere near 50% effort on behalf of the Palestinians. And they want to see a change in the education and in the incitement, which is unbelievable, that goes on. And Dubi, if you ask me, this is even more negative effect on Israeli public opinion than one suicide bombing. It depends who the suicide bomber is. Al-Qaeda, as Dubi said correct, has infiltrated into Gaza. So we know Al-Qaeda is all over the world, from London to Madrid to New York. But the question is, when you see what is being said on Arab television, by the way, controlled by Abu Mazen, and I'll come right away to Abu Mazen, this has a more negative effect. So again, we don't have to exaggerate it. It's not that the whole thing can come apart, one terrorist. No, one terrorist cannot bring the whole thing apart. Not so. It depends how the whole picture is. That's the first point I wanted to make. Number two, the gentleman left to ask the question. I agree here with Dubi regarding settlements. First of all, the primary value is not that the settlement should stay. I believe, again, as I've showed, this is what the polls show, and these polls are supported by a number of things. Dubi gave the example of disengagement, and we have examples of the elections. Israeli people see the preservation of Israel as a Jewish democratic state clearly as the primary value. Now, true, if you ask me, my reading now of Israeli public from all the data that I know, there is a clear majority was willing for removal of settlements in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, of course, because there are no more settlements in Gaza. In the context of a permanent agreement, there is a strong support for the maintaining of the large settlement blocks. Now, of course, when you ask the individual the large settlement blocks, that doesn't mean that he necessarily knows on the map exactly where each settlement is in the large settlement blocks. So he knows Maleh Adumim is a large settlement block, and Gush Etzion is part of a large settlement block. So there's flexibility here too. There's like 15% of the people who support removal of all the settlements 100% from the West Bank. I don't think anyone is talking about that seriously. I would imagine that even the Palestinians themselves realize that. You have swaps, you have a number of things, but again, this has to be put into context. Abu Mazen, you mentioned that after we stopped, what was the word you used? Knocking Arafat around. First of all, every document written today in any Israeli government office, not necessarily defense or foreign affairs, interior, health, at the end of any document, no matter what is written, you have to add 4 words in Hebrew. Tzarich lechazek et Abu Mazen. You have to strengthen Abu Mazen. No document in Israel can be written today, and no meeting can end up without the words which we mean. Sometimes we may do it in the wrong way, as you said. But everyone in Israel knows Tzarich lechazek et Abu Mazen. You have to strengthen Abu Mazen. And let me tell you, though, in Israeli public opinion, a totally different from the attitude to Arafat and Abu Mazen. You may say incorrectly, and not important, Israeli public opinion today, after what happened in Intifada, they never trusted Arafat to begin with that much. Today they are convinced that Arafat never wanted peace, never intended peace, etc. Abu Mazen is seen by Israeli public opinion as a decent chap, and the majority of Israeli public opinion thinks that he, by the way, he never was involved in terrorism, which is a very important point, and Salam Fayyad, the same thing. However, as was said before, the Israeli public opinion sees Abu Mazen as quite impotent in his ability to produce results. And until we're going to have the scientists who are going to come along and get a Nobel Peace Prize and maybe develop some political Viagra, then we have a problem in terms of Abu Mazen. But certainly, I think the vast majority of Israeli society, and this is the position of the Israeli government, believes that there is no better team than Abu Mazen and Salam Fayyad. This is what the Prime Minister is saying day in and day out. And we don't want this team to fall. If it'll fall, again, we'll have to take care of ourselves and see what comes after. But certainly, now whether we do it right or wrong is a good question. But certainly, and the final point I want to make, to agree in the end, that's why the center is strong. So I'll also agree with both of you. I think the only way, really, the only practical way is a long-term interim agreement. But I want to end this, my concluding sentence, a long-term agreement. There was someone in Israel, Dr. Sneh, Ephraim Sneh's father, who used to say before he began, I'll say something important and then I'll talk. So after I talked, I'll end up with some importance. And I think that the catch-22 in the Middle East is like this. The Palestinians believe that in the Middle East, anything temporary becomes permanent. That's why they are so concerned about an interim agreement. I meet with them in all track too. Sometimes Sam is there, and I hear them, and I know they're speaking. They say, we know you Jews. You say temporary, you mean permanent. And in the end, it's not going to give us. But you have to understand that for the Jews, it's exactly the opposite. Our great fear is that in the Middle East, everything that's permanent is only temporary. That is the great, that's why I said, Dubi, why it's not a matter that we need the Palestinians to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. No, I don't need them to recognize what I am. But the fear that by even a permanent agreement in the eyes of the Palestinians is only temporary. This is the great catch-22. How do you convince us that the permanent agreement, if you'll sign, is indeed permanent? Not therefore. Let me finish. My last sentence. Therefore, I think we need an interim agreement, which on the one hand, like you said, may have a shelf. In other words, it may have and say, after a number of years, after this will be implemented, this is going to be a more permanent agreement, so as to allay the concerns of the Palestinians. On the other hand, to permit time to develop when the Palestinians, as Dubi said, will prove those 3 years, Dubi, those 3 years that you mentioned, had for 3 years we've seen in Rafah the Palestinian police working better than us, and if we had seen better than Meir, etc. In other words, we need a time to pass within an interim scale, where we say, down the road there will be a more permanent agreement and solution. But in the meantime, show us that this permanency is not temporary, and the results on the ground can prove that we can trust in it. In my opinion, and that I think we all agreed, is really the only possible way to go further. An interim agreement in the meantime, with a vision of what a more permanent agreement will be, if the facts on the ground give it support.